Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us at today's program featuring author Isabel Quintero and artist Zeke Peña, presented as part of the Wignall Museum's Home Edition. Home Edition is a series of curated artist talks, workshops, and discussions featuring artists and cultural workers. My name is Rebecca TRAWICK, and I serve as the director and curator of the Wignall Museum at Chaffey College. The Wignall Museum is a teaching museum, an interdisciplinary art space that introduces Chaffey College students, faculty, staff, and community members to innovative contemporary art objects and ideas. By fostering critical thinking, visual literacy, discourse, and empathy, the museum seeks to enhance the intellectual and cultural life of our community. We want to take a moment to recognize that we are situated on the Rancho Cucamonga campus of Chaffey College, which resides on the traditional and unceded lands of the Tongva people. We offer our recognition and respect to the elders, both past, present, and future.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andy HADLE. I'm the preparator at the museum. I will be assisting Rebecca and Roman with today's Zoom session.
Hello, my name is Roman STOLLENWERK. I'm assistant curator at the Wignall Museum. Visit us at www.chaffey.edu/Wignall to access our full schedule of programs and available recordings. When possible, recordings are made available on our website. Announcements post to our email subscribers and social media when new videos are available. All recordings on our site include captions and audio descriptions as options. You can follow us on social media, including Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Wignall Museum. Visit our website About Us page if you'd like to sign up to receive email announcements. And we also ask that you complete a brief survey after the session at tinyurl.com/Wignall Spring 21 Visitor Survey. Thank you.
Thanks, Roman and Andy. So today I have the honor of introducing our guest artists, author Isabel Quintero and artist Zeke Peña. Zeke Peña makes comics and visual narratives to reclaim stories and remix history. Peña was born in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and grew up in El Paso, Texas. While doodling in the margins of his notebook, he received a degree in art history from the University of Texas at Austin. His work uses a mashup of political cartoon, border rasquatch, and hip hop culture, to address universal themes of identity, politics, ecology, and social justice. He has won awards for his book illustrations, and his work is in several collections of American and Chicano art. Peña is currently digging into family history to write stories for future projects. Isabel Quintero is an award-winning author and the daughter of Mexican immigrants. She lives and writes in the Inland Empire. Her first YA novel, Gabby, A Girl in Pieces, was the recipient of multiple awards and honors. Quintero is the author of the chapter books Ugly Cat and Pablo, and Ugly Cat and Pablo and the Missing Brother. In 2016, she was commissioned by the J. Paul Getty Museum to write a nonfiction YA graphic biography on Mexican photography icon Graciela Iturbide, illustrated by Zeke Peña. Photographic went on to win the Boston Globe Horn Book Award, among other recognitions. My Puppy Has a Motorcycle, also illustrated by Zeke Peña, was awarded the Tomas Rivera Award and a Pura Belpré honor. Quintero has a story included in the anthology Come On In. It was published in 2020. And I'm happy to announce that Come On In is the Chaffey College One Book, One College official selection for the upcoming year. So that means that the college will teach and study the book during the 21-22 academic year. So look to the OBOC webpage for info on activities, discussions, and events. I'll include that link in the chat as well. So please join me in welcoming Zeke and Isabel to Home Edition.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really exciting to be here. Zeke and I are happy. Well, I hope Zeke is happy to be here.
Yes,
we're happy to be here. I'm happy to be presenting in the IE, at least virtually. And I'm excited about the Come On In anthology being part of the One Book, One College. The Addie had told us that it was one book, one college, somewhere in Southern California, but he didn't mention what college it was at. So it's kind of nice to be presenting here for that.
Hello, everyone. Greetings, everyone. I am Zeke Peña, and thank you so much, Rebecca and Roman and Andrew and the Wignall Museum for having us and making this space for us. Yeah, I think we were excited about this opportunity to maybe try something different that have we done something like this before? I don't know we've done something like this, but we're gonna just kind of interview each other and ask questions. I have a slideshow of some of our work that we've done, the collaborations that we have worked on over the years. And we're also excited to hear any questions that you all might have.
So yeah, we'll be kind of doing like a conversation with each other. It was between conversation, you know, we wanted to try something different. So it was between conversation and dance off, and we went with conversation. So, you know,
Only because you know who would win that battle.
me, yeah, that's who it was.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you know, I really enjoy working with you. A lot of your work, though, you know, the comics that you make, the art you make, is personal, right? A lot of your work is personal, whether it be work around water issues at the border, or stories of growing up in El Paso. But then you also bring other people's stories to life with dynamic illustrations that are thoughtful and revelatory to even the writers of those stories. And I speak for myself, and I'm pretty sure I speak for other writers that you collaborate with as well. How does your approach differ between creating something for yourself and creating something for someone else?
So I'm trying to think like how, if there is a different approach. I mean, I think that I feel like I approach them with the same intent, right? And at the heart of my work is always story, which I think is, you can relate to that also, right, as a writer. And it's honoring that story. I think first and foremost, it's honoring the people whose story it is. I think it's also an interesting question, because I feel like the stories that I make about myself are in some ways always about the other people that make me who I am, right? So if I'm telling a story about me, it's actually, I'm telling a story about my grandfather or my grandmother or my parents or my family or something. And always kind of wanting to acknowledge that, right? That those are the things that make me who I am. And then I think in working with community over the years, you know, it's about telling that story, right? Like participating and collaborating and telling that story with other people. And something that I talk a lot about, I guess, when I'm giving other presentations, and you've probably heard me say before, is that I don't like, I try not to elevate or put on a pedestal too much what I do. I see myself as having like a set of skills and really just trying to be a tool for the community, right? So I am something or someone that people can tap to say, hey, we need help with this project, or we need help doing this. And I think that definitely changes like my approach when I'm working on a project, towards just focusing on what the story is that the people are trying to tell. So for you and I, right, to get specific to some of the collaborations that you and I have worked on, that's why I'm always asking you questions, right? Like when we work on something, I'm always like, okay, well, what does this mean? Or, you know, what connection does this have for you? And then also just specific things like about characters. What would this character do? How does this character look? And I think, you know, and it's something that we found out, right, that our experience at Cinco Puntos Press. So for those people who are unfamiliar, what Gabby, A Girl in Pieces, the slides you're looking at right now, was how Isabel and I met through a book that was published by Cinco Puntos Press. And it was it was my first time having my work published by the book industry. and it was Isabel's first, formally published work by a book publisher, and we collaborated on that. And what you and I found out, right, was that it was unique for us to be able to even have conversation with each other, right? So I'll throw the question back to you, right? It's a similar question, which is the difference between working on photographic, which is the slides that you are looking at right now. It's the life of Graciela Iturbide, and then us, either you writing, Gabby, or working on My Papi Has a Motorcycle. So how does that differ for you in your approach?
I like what you said about intent, and I was about to ask you my least favorite question that you asked me. What do you want the audience to get out of your work? And you make me think about that, so it's a different thing that I have to think about from when I'm writing the personal, and then I'm writing, like, for example, Graciela Iturbide's life, right? I think like one of the obvious differences is, like, for example, My Papi Has a Motorcycle is based on a memory of me riding on the back of my dad's motorcycle as a kid, right? So if you've read the book, there's an author's note in the end that pretty much explains what the book is about. It's a love story for Corona, those of you from the IE. It's a love letter to Corona and a love letter to my dad. And so I have my memory to excavate for that book, right? Like, I can dig through my memory, I can dig through the feelings that I know I had when I rode on the back of my dad's motorcycle. I can feel the connection I have with a certain location, geography. That's my child screaming. So if that's what you're hearing, he's screaming in the background. So that relatability to space, to locate specific location, right? And that's all very personal. And I know where Cupid's is, and I know how I felt when they covered it up with now the taco shop thing. And so it's just the outline. But for something like photographic, right, I'm having to not, like, I don't have that access. I don't have the access to those memories, to that experience, or to those feelings. And so I'm dependent on, I was dependent not only on, like, Graciela, because even a lot of it, right, we sent Graciela questions, but we'd get the responses from her assistant. Like, sometimes she'd answer, right? She's also older. So sometimes she'd answer, but sometimes her assistant would answer. And so now it's, more degrees of separation. And even more so when I'm digging through interviews, right? Now I'm looking through an interview of not only what she said about, a certain thing about process, but on how the interviewer, like, what did they cut, what did they keep, right? And so I feel like I had to do a lot more, like, I just had to be way more careful, right? Way more careful, because, like, one, this is somebody else's story that was entrusted to me to bring to an audience, and two, like, she's alive still. So it's not like I'm writing about an artist who's passed away, who I only have to worry about their ghost, right? Like, I have to worry about Graciela, like, being upset that, I didn't do a good job with her story. And then also, like, my interpretation of all of that, right? Like, it's not a book report, right? Like, these things happened. It's not just a timeline. It's like an actual story. It's a narrative. And so I had to figure out how I wanted to present that. And ultimately, after going back and forth, we ended up writing a little bit more lyrical than what I had initially aimed for. So yeah, so it's a weird dance.
That makes me think of one of the other questions that I was thinking about asking you, which is if you could talk a little bit about, because you practice writing in many different ways, right? and many different forms and kind of modes. So talking about the lyrical, right? Like you used some of that lyrical kind of way of writing in photographic. Can you talk about how writing poetry, has helped you go on to then develop longer narratives, and kind of the interplay between those two things? Do you go to one more than the other? Do you feel more comfortable writing poems and lyrical stuff more than writing these longer narratives? And what has that been like between those two?
If you had asked me in 2012, I would have said poetry, right? Like I would have said poetry all the way 2013, because I really hadn't had any real experience writing fiction, because that's all I had written was poetry. And
Right.
that's, I had envisioned that my first book would be like a collection of poems. And like now, it's been really hard for me to get back into writing poems. It's been a couple years that I've actually sat down to write poems. And part of it was, there was a point where I was writing poetry, trying to get back into it, but I found myself really preoccupied with my mom dying. Like really, my head was like, she became mortal. And like now I realized, oh, my mom, like someday she's not going to be here. And it was very stressful. And every time I would sit and write, that's what I would write about. And I just didn't want to. So I kind of stopped for a minute writing poetry. But poetry is always there. It's been my first love when it comes to writing. And it's helped me in a lot of ways, right? So in poetry, there's a lot of cutting, right? You've got a little limited space to either tell a story or to present an image or whatever it is that you're trying to do with a poem, and you just cut, right? And so that helps me. I know you don't believe this, but it helps me cut a lot of the excess, but so, and I think I feel, sometimes I feel less attached to it than some other prose writers that I speak to, that are like, oh, I didn't want to cut this whole section, or whatever. And I'm like,
you feel more free to edit?
Yeah,
I
feel more free to
edit.
I feel more free to edit. And also I feel like I worry a lot about language and what a sentence sounds like, which I know it probably comes from practicing poetry, right? Because how does this sentence sound when you read it out loud? What word, like I really focus on word choice a lot of times. And so it's really helpful, but sometimes it is like, okay, Isabel, just like, check it out.
Just say the thing.
Just say the thing. Yeah.
So then what about that transition then, like away from that kind of freedom of like the prose and the poetry, right? To then having to be very specific and write like a sentence with a period at the end of it that connects to another sentence and so on and so forth. So how was that transition from you then going on to write Gabby? Well, Gabby's interesting, right? Because it has that in there. But how has it been moving forward from that and that transition away from the poetry?
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever like moved away completely, right? Because like Gabby, initially Gabby was a novel in verse. So some of those sections in Gabby like are just delineated poems, right? I was like, I'm gonna just make this look like a paragraph, and that's what I did. And in some of my other work, interestingly enough, in that Come On In anthology, the story or the excerpt that's in there is actually an excerpt from a novel I'm working on that just got sold, a young adult novel. And it's like changed completely. But at one point, that particular novel was, in my mind, I was like, I'm just going to do chapters of delineated poems. Like that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be this really experimental thing and blah, blah, blah. And then I was doing it. I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. Like I don't have it in me, but I don't know. I wish I had like this great answer, like for questions like this.
Does
like,
it get
what's
in the
your
way?
process?
I'll
Does
ask you a more direct question. Does, because it sounds like, and I have a similar experience, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm coming to making comics and making books,
Yeah.
like definitely through the back door. I don't have a
Yeah.
degree. I'm like self-taught, learn all this stuff on YouTube. And so I'm coming at it from like making, community posters,
Yeah.
making album covers for bands, right? It's
Mhm.
a lot of cover work and things like that. And so it's a double-edged sword for me, right? Like on some ends, it really like makes my work look unique. I feel like the
Mhm.
process that I go about and approaching it and the
Yeah.
way that I see it and visualize it. But then for me, it does also get in the way sometimes. It gets in the way of the process and being what I think would be like considered efficient, right? Like an efficient way of producing work and an efficient way of, finishing a project basically.
Yeah.
So do you feel like it ever, no.
No, I think, and I think you and I, because we're similar in that, like, I didn't study creative writing, right? Like my
Mhm.
degree is in composition, right?
Mhm.
And I don't have an MFA. I've
Mhm.
taken like 2 creative writing classes. And that's like it, right? Like besides like doing a workshop with friends and stuff. And I think that it's actually like those kinds of things are beneficial, like coming in through the back door, because I think we're not kind of weighed down by this is how it has to look to be professional. This is what a comic looks like, right? Or this is what a novel looks like. And if it doesn't have A, B, and C, then it's
Mhm.
not a real novel. It's not a real piece of work,
Mhm.
or not a real comic, right? And so
Mhm.
I really think that poetry, I think it is poetry because there's so much freedom in it. It
Mhm.
allows me to see prose and to see fiction in that way. Like, how many ways can I tell this story, right? So like when you're
Mhm.
putting a poem together, like, oh, this needs to be a haiku, or it needs to be, a villanelle, or it needs to be free verse, right? Like I
Mhm.
just change it. And I feel that way with writing fiction, right? Like, oh, this story should be a children's book and it should be this short, or this should be a middle grade novel and it should be this, like, right? Like,
Hmm.
and it's
It's like those norms, those trends of like what publishing is telling us that a book is or has to look like, right?
yeah. So yeah, no, I think that going, along with the trend thing, right? Like I think trends are dangerous, right? Like trends are dangerous because they change so quickly, right?
Mhm.
And like asking, what are people reading right now that's going to sell and what's marketable, right? Like those are
Mhm.
things that I think neither you or I ask each other,
Mhm.
or like we just create work. At least I feel that you do, right? Like you're going to create what you're going to create, and
Yeah.
thankfully it's been all right. Like
Yeah.
it's been
Well,
all right.
yeah, and I mean, for me, that my ignorance in that is it's like a blessing in some ways. Like I didn't even know like what anything was, like the middle grade stuff, and like I had primarily been practicing in the studio, like painting stuff, community projects, and then the book project came along with you. So in what year is Gabby again? Remind me. It's 2013,
2014.
14? Yeah,
14, yeah.
14. So then 3 years later, Photographic comes along and I just say yes, never
Mhm.
having made like a full length graphic novel, like either of us. And going into that and not knowing just made me rely on the thing that I did know how to do, which was
Mhm.
like static images, like more of the studio work. And then my reader's knowledge of what a graphic novel looks like, right?
Mhm.
And from studying it just from being a participant like in the
Yeah.
culture, for so long. And so I think just just focusing on the work, right, and just focusing on the story and having the story center us, I think
Mhm.
what makes that book look really unique and read really unique, right, is
Yeah.
that it doesn't fall into any one of those things. It's kind of hard to categorize at some point.
Yeah, because neither of us were we were just like, this is what our graphic novel is going to look like,
Right.
So this is what you get, right?
For sure.
You know, So I don't know if this is along those lines, but I did want to talk about this. You know, that one of the reasons I enjoy collaborating with you is because I respect you and your work and that intent you have
Thank you.
of your work, right? And so and your values, right? Like saying no to projects, like that's huge. That's like a huge thing that I constantly am learning from you about
Mm.
setting boundaries and what is our worth as an artist, as a writer, as a creative person, right? And you're very community minded, right? And justice minded. You do workshops with youth, and you're constantly doing flyers for community awareness or fundraisers in El Paso and surrounding areas, right? So how does it affect the way that you view art, right? That you view your work? Does it affect your practice?
It's at the center of it, right? Like there's a quote by author, I'm gonna get like all referencey. I don't do this often, but Herbert Marcuse, he's actually like a socialist, like art historian. He's like a Marxist and stuff. And he has this quote that I like live by, which is, he uses the term art, right? I won't get into a discussion about art. I don't use art to refer to my work, right? But he uses this term art, and he says art cannot change the world, but it can contribute to changing the consciousness of the people who can, right? So it's not that the work itself is doing something. It's that it's allowing a pathway for connection or engagement, or if it's a didactic project, right? It's something that's about educating and disseminating knowledge or information. And I think that again, like going back to that idea of like taking the thing off of the pedestal, right? The work that I make is not about the object, right? I'm not concerned with that, which is what's excellent about working digitally, right? Is that it creates this confusing thing for museums and galleries and collectors in the art industry, because it's like, where is the thing that I can hold on to? Where is the thing that can be shipped from here to here and the thing? And I like that about it, right? Because if story is at the heart of what I'm doing and story is at the heart of my work, that's what's important, right? And when I was working on making these large scale paintings, these like 4-foot oil paintings on wood, and they're like these really big things, and showing that work in the community, right? Most of the time the reaction is going to be, wow, it's painted so well. I love the way it painted. Or this one is the one that I always get is, it looks so realistic, And so it's this idea that that the reaction that someone is having to the work is mostly about the technical part of it. It's mostly about the object and the technicality of like painting. And which is why I moved away from it, which is why I stopped painting like that. Because if story is my intent, right? And story's connection to preserving culture, to creating movement, right? To, for me personally, like being a way for me to unpack the complexities of my identity in terms of race, class, sexuality, gender, all the things, right? Is that, comics, right, and illustration and the digital formats, right, are a way to easily disseminate work. The book is an excellent way to disseminate work. The zine, right, which we both practice in making zines. It's a great way to get that stuff out there that kind of removes that part of it where the focus is on the thing, and it's more about the story and the contents of what's going on in there. But yeah, I mean, the community stuff and the community work, I'm always trying to find that balance of maintaining the commitments that I have to my community, the long time and lifelong commitments that I have to my community, while also, needing to take on freelance projects and work on things to make a living, to support family and all this stuff. But I think that the community work is really, it informs the practice, right? Because if you look at the history, of our communities, that practice of being engaged with the community is, something that has contributed throughout the generations to providing more opportunities, right? About if we talk about social justice, racial justice, all of these things. And so keeping that at the heart of all the things that I'm doing, because even if it is a freelance project, like you mentioned, saying no to projects, saying no to projects and having those critical discussions with publishers and people who are engaging me to work on stuff is like now part of the practice. It's now part of the like way of practicing, you know, those values, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Am I the right person to be telling this story? Are you the right person to be publishing it? You know, and having all of those questions. So I think it has definitely entered into my practice on a day-to-day basis and professional life with how I conduct myself and how I engage with people, and being intentional about, you know, engaging with those people.
Now that you're more, you know, further along in your career, it's become easier, or to say no to projects, right? Because I think about this, because I do the same thing, right? Like I've been asked to tell stories that I have no business telling stories about, right? And I think that Isabel, like before Gabby or when Gabby came out, had a harder time saying no because of the fear. Like I just started my career, right? Like, and I be able to say no? But then I reflect on that, and that's such a cage we put ourselves in also, right? Like we just become part of, like we just continue to just be part of the cogs in this machine that we're constantly saying, like, this machine needs to change. Okay, well, we're not changing, so this machine is never going to change, right? So do you feel it's become easier, or do you feel like that's just who you've always been?
Of course it becomes easier, right? Like you know, having several opportunities to work on projects is, you know, it's a privilege, right? It's a privilege to say no to things, right? It's an economic privilege that I have at this point. You know, but I'll say that you know, because I worked in doing graphic design, right? And in graphic design, it's harder to practice those kind of like, it's harder to practice that when you're doing graphic design, because it's such a transactional thing, and you're really just having to make work for like whoever's coming through the front door and saying, hey, I'd like to hire you for a project. But I think even in that practice, I've tried to do my best to keep that balance, right? So even when I was taking projects that were just strictly like business minded, like graphic design projects, to try to keep that balance, to also give my time and my effort, you know, to working on community campaigns and things like that. So it's always just had to be both, you know, and that's that, you know, to your point about being a, you know, whatever, a cog in the machine, it's like that's the balance that we have to strike, right? Is like how to like, I guess, keep that in balance. Yeah. What about you? I mean, how have you not, like, before or so after Gabby, right? Like, are you having different conversations with people who are engaging you?
Yeah, I send more lengthy emails to people asking me to do projects, you know, asking them why they're asking me and not asking these other people that would
Yeah.
are better equipped at telling the story, you know, than I would be, you know, or just saying no, right? Just plain just saying no, which I think is not it. I think it was, saying no has been a difficult thing to learn for me, right? And I think that comes with being, you know, a woman, you know, the way that I was raised as a, you know, was as a Chicana Mexican, like in my family, and I'd get in trouble for saying no, right, to things that I felt that I shouldn't be doing. So I'd get in trouble all the time. And so I think that, but I think now as I'm older, like I'm almost 40, just next year I turn 40, right? So like I should be practicing saying no more often, right? and yeah, so yeah, it's gotten easier. But I'm looking at the time right now.
Yeah, we're coming up on our time.
Yeah.
There's a question
Or
in the
question.
chat. Do you want to?
Yeah. How did you publish your first book?
Yeah, so we'll take
go
this
ahead.
question, and then anyone in the audience, if you want to send your question through the chat, we'll take them there. Or if you'd love to speak up, I would personally love to hear your voice if you're willing to offer your question there. But while you think of a question, we'll answer this one in the chat if you want to take that one.
Yeah, how did you publish your first book, and was it hard to publish it? You know, if you're a writer out there, one of the things I will tell you, and you probably already know this, is rejection is part of, I think, any creative person, whether you're a musician, visual artist, comic artist. Although I hear that cartoonists, you guys have it pretty easy, right? Like it's like easy to get.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's a breeze.
But it's rejection is just part of the job, right? Like in Spanish, we have a saying, right? No soy monedita de oro, right? Pa caerle bien a todos. I'm not a little gold coin that everyone is going to love, right? So publishing my first book, I started writing Gabby in 2007, and it was published, it was bought in 2013. So there in itself was like 5 years of finishing the project and then rewriting the whole book, and from novel and verse to now prose, and then trying to look for an agent and getting rejected, right? Sending query letters out to agents. And then when I was like, well, I guess an agent isn't going to want it, then I'm going to try to send it to small publishers. And that's how I found Cinco Puntos. I was an elementary school librarian, and I was buying, expanding the collection to have more books about Latinx folks and on the shelves. And that's how I found Cinco Puntos, because I liked the work they did. And I sent it to them. And thankfully they liked it. Fortunately they enjoyed it. Lee liked the book. I had already sent them other projects, and I was just looking through my email recently at like the first thing I sent to Cinco Puntos, and I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot I had even sent them this project, and they rejected it, right? And so it's so that's how that came to be, right? Like I sold it on my own to Cinco Puntos. That doesn't happen often. It usually be a small press, right, if that's what you're going for. And it was hard, right? It was hard because publishing is ruthless. After Gabby started getting awards and recognitions, or was being put on lists, some of those agents that rejected me actually emailed me and were like, oh, we're interested in your work. Like, you weren't interested before. Like, I don't know what changed, So yeah, it gets a little tough sometimes, but I do recommend, like, if you want to publish, it's a lot of work, but if that is your goal, keep at it, and it just, sometimes it's a crapshoot. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes it's, you've got to put in the work. I've talked to people who are like, I was rejected 3 times. I don't think I'm gonna be a writer. Nope, you're not gonna be a writer if 3 times you're like, I'm done. So just keep at it.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you both for your stories. They're really interesting. You both seem like you've found like a collaborative groove, and I'm really interested in artists who collaborate. And so one of my questions for you is, where do you feel like you have the most synergy in your work, and where do you feel like you have the most points of divergence when you're trying to create a product together?
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah.
You can, something come to mind for you?
I think I have to think on that a little bit. I think that's the thing, like.
I mean, in terms of like synergy and like where we connect, I mean, we connect through like our friendship. I don't know. It was weird. Like and I think this is something that's important for me is like when I'm working with anyone, whether it's like a short-term collaboration or a long project kind of collaboration or a community thing, or even just someone engaging to work on a project, right? Or wanting to showcase work like a museum or gallery or something. I don't know. I just want to talk to them. You know, I want to like, it's like, there's so much emailing going on and stuff. And there's something nice about just being able to share space with someone, to hear someone's voice, to kind of have conversation. And I think that we were, you know, I was trying to be really intentional about that, creating that kind of relationship, because the first project that we work on, Gabby, A Girl in Pieces, I was only doing the book cover. I drew some interior zines too, but you know, I could tell right off the bat that this was a really important story to Isabel. And so I wanted to treat it in the right way and treat it with respect. And so I think where we really sync up is in the conversation and brainstorming part of it, right? Like it's really much about like, hey, okay, this is kind of like the idea that I have. What do you think about it? And in some ways that's about vulnerability, right? That's just like a normal relationship thing, right? It's about being vulnerable and saying, look, here's this really, really poorly drawn idea that I have. Like, what do you think about it? And trusting Isabel to like say, yeah, that's cool, that works. Or no, I don't think that that's a good idea. Maybe think about doing this. So I don't know how you feel about that.
I actually was going to say, you know, I think the fact that we have, like in any relationship, right? Like communication is really important. And so I think that I feel free to talk with Zeke about ideas that I have for projects and to receive his feedback and criticism, because I know it's not going to be like, he's not going to be a jerk about it, right? Or it'll be a good conversation. And the fact that we often get into conversations about projects and we're on the same page about like, I'm not feeling this, you know, it's giving me a hard time, or like, what do you think about doing this? And like, oh yeah, like that's exciting, right? Like the fact that we can like be really honest with each other about things, right? About work things, and also people things. Like I learned some things about myself from Zeke, right? But it's easy because sometimes you do work with people and you're like, I don't think I ever want to work with this person again because they're not good at taking criticism or giving criticism. They're not good at, they're too scared to tell you what they really feel about your work. And so you need honesty and that vulnerability when you're working with someone in order to get into the group, in order for the work to be good, right? To be something that you could both be proud of, right? Because I'm proud of the work that we've done together, you know. I'm not like, oh, that book that I did with that person, like I'm excited about it, right?
Yeah, so it's not just professional, it goes deeper. And yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, it's a personal relationship, and I want to, because I think that that's also something that's missing from a lot of industries, right? Is that personal part of like, hey, how are you doing? Like that sense of care, right? Like I care about Isabel as a person, and that should be first and foremost, right? Like, are you okay? How are you doing? Okay, I'm good, I'm okay, let's get into it. And I feel like that just sets a really nice pace for being able to then go on to have those vulnerabilities, the conversation, the questioning, right? And in my critique always comes in questioning. It's never in like, I think this is good or bad. It's what does this mean? Or have you thought about, you know, this, like, what does this mean for this person? So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
I love that you have both talked about, both in the relationship that you two have together and also working, you know, on Graciella's book, for example, like the trust that is really inherent in a successful relationship, right? A successful project. I love that. And I also love that you both talked about sort of coming in through the back door and not really knowing, like you didn't know the rule book. So it gave you some freedom to experiment both as a team and independently. And so I think those are parts of conversations about creativity that are often sort of lost. So I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. And then Zeke, since you mentioned care, and I think that's also something that's often left out of these conversations, both like from an industry perspective or, you know, the relationships that make any industry thrive, right? Like that's often lost. So in the sort of theme of care, and you know, we've all just we're all still living through, right, a really rough year due to the pandemic, racial unrest and upheaval, and the, you know, sort of long-term effects of the public health crisis that we don't even know. You know, I don't think any of us really know what that's going to look like. So I would just ask both of you, like, how, and Isabel, I also know you're a new mother, so like how has all of this affected your practices and your focus and, you know, sort of what's important to you?
Yeah, I mean, you took this was like my third question for Zeke in my list of questions I had for him, right? Like, how has this year affected you? For me, definitely being a mom has reshifted some priorities, right? I think that's also made me grow into saying no to more things, right? Because now I have a child, and as before, I worked all the time. When we were working on photographic, sometimes it was like 1 or 2 in the morning, and Zeke and I were on the phone, like working on this project, right? I can't imagine doing that right now, having a child, right? Like that's shifted drastically. Also, it's put into perspective, like what do I want? What do I want my writing career to look like? Who am I as a writer? Like, it's making me question all of those things, right? And trying to focus on writing has been hard. You know, I sold a bunch of books, and now I have to finish them. Thankfully, I've written a big chunk, but it's hard emotionally. You know, I'm someone who suffers from anxiety and bouts of depression, and then having a child during this time and not being able to have any childcare, where, you know, my partner is also he's also a creative person, and he's a cartoonist, and so he's having to work on his projects, I'm having to work on my projects. There was no one to help us with the kid, and so that's a lot to put into perspective. Like, well, where does my work fit in, and how do I want my work to fit into this? And realizing that sometimes I'm just not going to write that day. Like, it's just not going to happen as much as I want it to happen, and that it's okay. Like, things are just going to keep on happening, right? Like, I'm going to live the next day, and I will write the next day. And I've had to really slow down, really just be more accepting of things, and having long conversations with my therapist about slowing down and just accepting that I cannot control everything. I think that's been the biggest thing, you know, this last year, because like I haven't even been able to hug my mom in over a year, like a lot of people, right? My parents, and it's been hard. It's been really hard.
Yeah, equally, you know, it's been tough. I mean, I think creatively, as it relates specifically to creativity, it's been a very slow moment. You know, I had all these plans of like finishing books. I'm writing a couple projects, like, and I think equally, I mean, to the issue of care and creativity, right? Is that you know, care and collaboration starts with self-care, right? Like, if I'm not taking care of myself, I'm not in the position, or I don't have the capacity to care for the other person that I'm collaborating with or in relationship with, you know? And then I think, you know, a care equally, like care for a project that I'm working on is not going to happen unless I'm kind of like in a good place to approach it. So I think that it's also been a slowing down for me, you know, trying to be present, you know, in the moment, but also, you know, the bills got to get paid. So it's also a mixture of just kind of, you know, going through and getting things done when they need to get done, you know? So it's just been a balance of those two things. But it has definitely made me reprioritize a little bit the projects that I'm working on and be, even more intentional about, what I'm working on and how I'm spending my time. I think, that resetting of priorities. So yeah, that's where I've been at with it. I don't know if there's another question. I think there's one in the chat. What I don't know if we're up on time too, but what gives motivation to keep going? Because this comes from Natalie. And what gives motivation to keep on going? Because I'm taking English as my major and I see how I write my essay and they are low grades. I feel like that puts me back because I love writing, but I don't know if it's good and understandable. So maybe some writing advice.
Here's the thing about writing, right? It's practice. Like, that's what it is. I'm not, and I don't know how I'm going to sound. This might sound terrible, right? But there are some things you can teach, right? You can learn how to write a better essay, right? Like you can learn how to write. It means that you're putting in the work. I think a lot of folks have this idea that writing is like all this inspiration, like I'm outside looking at the clouds and then I come inside and I'm like, oh, I write a poem and it's great. And it's not that. Like you are writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and learning and reading, right? And so if you look at my, I did some short stories. I tried writing short stories like early on when I was at Cal State San Bernardino. And if you look at them, which you won't because they're terrible, but if you look at them, they're terrible, right? They're just like, I look back at them, I'm like, what was I even trying to do here, right? But I kept practicing and I kept rewriting and taking, the critique that I got from other people and learning and kept reading. Like it will happen, right? You just have to really keep at it. If you're trying to tell your truth, right? Now, in regards to English class, right, as I'm putting like teacher hat on, like that's, essays are hard, right? Like essays are hard, especially, if you're a freshman or sophomore, I don't know what year you are at school, it's hard work, but you can do it, right? Like I really suggest like talking to your professor and talking to your the writing center. I'm sure there's a writing center at Chafee. Like now I'm really going teacher here. Go on the OWL at Purdue, like doing all the things that you're supposed to do, be doing, right? Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's like the thing that I tell my students when I'm teaching, because I adjunct sometimes. So do not be afraid to ask questions, right? Because that's how you're going to grow if you don't ask questions.
I'll just throw a little something out there, which is, like for me, it's about focusing on the technical parts. Like I'll work on certain things or write certain things, whether it's a comic or like a little short script or a little prose thing. It's like I'll work on those things sometimes just as a technical exercise. Like it's literally just the exercise of doing it. And it's not necessarily going to be the greatest idea or the grandest idea or ever be published or I'll ever see it again. But it's the process of doing that over many, many years, then when you get to the thing that you actually want to be working on, it becomes a little easier. And I'll say that's how I've, improved my writing, doing those technical exercises and then also, reading and looking at the work of others. So, yeah.
Well, thank you both. I'm super sorry to say that I think we're at time, so I want to be respectful of your time and our attendees' time as well. I have a million more questions, and I think some of our attendees do as well. But I want to thank you both so much for your generosity today. I love talking about collaboration. It's not a mystery, it's a real thing. So thanks for debunking some of the misconceptions. Really appreciate both of you. And I want to thank all of you who were able to attend today and spend a little bit of your afternoon with us. We appreciate you as well. Thanks again, Zeke and Isabel. Take care. Everyone, please take good care. Be safe.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right.